Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 10th edition of the ASP.NET Blazor Community Stand-Up. With us today, we have Jeremy, John, and Dan.
Woo! Great to be here.
Yep. So I'm Mackinnon. I'm a developer on the Blazor team. And today we are going to be talking about some Blazor updates coming in .NET 8 RC2, including some exciting new Blazor identity UI components. But yeah, so we'll be seeing some cool demos later. Before we get to that, though, I think we have some community links to go over. So if we could start with sharing my screen.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Cool. So first, we have a GitHub repo called Clean Architecture with Blazor Server. And this is essentially a very fully featured template that you can use when building a Blazor Server application. It has a lot more stuff built in than what we provide in the default templates. So if you want a starting point that's closer to maybe like what your final app is going to look like, this might be an interesting choice for you. It uses Blazor, and it has a really nice UI, and it has support for various databases that you can use, and even has an extension that you can install for Visual Studio that lets you like scaffold new features in your application. They call it a code generator, but it's really interesting. It's pretty cool, and it has a lot of stars, so that's how you know it's good, right? But yeah, so definitely check that out if you're starting a new Blazor Server app and want a good starting point. Next, we have the Blazor Web Audio library by Christopher Strube. And this is something that we've shown before, but more and more keeps on getting added to it. And there's this cool playground page that was added to the demo site that I thought would be pretty cool to like show. So you can do things like add a, well, this will be the output, the audio destination. You could add an oscillator. You can add like a gain node to control the volume. And I'm going to turn that down so that it doesn't blast everyone's eardrums. And then you can like add connectors to these things. And I don't know if the audio comes through, but like on my end, the sound is playing and you can adjust the frequency. It's pretty cool. And like there's more and more of the API being supported. But by the way, this is a wrapper over the web audio web standard. And more keeps getting added to the API. So it seems like we're getting pretty close to being able to write like a full digital audio workstation in Blazor, which I think is just really awesome. But
he just keeps adding more and more stuff to that. It blows my mind.
Yeah, I see tweets about it like every week. It feels like it's really awesome.
Nice work.
Yeah. And okay, this is the same thing. It's just the GitHub repo for that. So yeah, there's that.
Give it a star, Mackinnon. If you haven't given a star, that's the...
Yes, I'm not signed in, so I can't. But... yeah. All right. And then next we have some updates for the Fluent UI Blazor library. This is, if you haven't heard of it, it's a Blazor component library that kind of wraps the Microsoft Fluent UI web components. And yeah, so this new version has a lot of like stability and improvements to some components like nav menu, nav group, and nav link. And yeah, just overall just a lot of fixes, improvements and performance things. And yeah, so if you're using this library, definitely check out the new version 3.2.0. And that is that. Next, we have an update to the Sync Fusion Blazor library. They have this new version that has support for .NET 8. Some component libraries will be likely reacting to some of the new changes that are coming in .NET 8, and Sync Fusion is one of the libraries that has started to do that. And so they have a new version that is starting to support .NET 8, and they will be having another version, Volume 4, which will have which will utilize even more of the capabilities of .NET 8. But this version has various performance improvements to some different components and things like that. So if you're using Sync Fusion, check out the new version. Or if you haven't heard of it, maybe it's worth looking into if you're looking for a component library for your app.
Yeah, if you own your own component library that you maintain, you should definitely start looking at static server rendering with your components and just see what the experience there looks like. There might be places where your components are currently assuming that they're being rendered interactively, that maybe they could more gracefully degrade for a static server rendered user experience. We've been working our way through that with our own Blazor components. So, we're doing this too. It's not just the ecosystem that needs to update, but yeah, if you've got components, try them out with static server rendering and see what the experience looks like. Maybe you can adjust things so they can work without even an interactive renderer in play.
Yes, great points. And the last thing that we have is a YouTube video by Patrick, and this is going over some of the new project templates that we have for Blazor and .NET 8. It talks about the Blazor web template, the Blazor web app template, how you can use both Blazor server and WebAssembly inside it, and also covers the new auto mode. So if you're looking for like a nice overview of all these new things that are coming up, I think this is a good video to take a look at.
Patrick God, is that his last name? Or is it
yes, it's G-O-D.
G-O-D, Mr. God?
Wow. But I wasn't sure if it was like...
That's such a high bar for expectations.
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely. Okay, so yeah, I think that's it we have for the community links. I guess we can transition to the next part. I think, Jen, you're next.
Am I up?
I think so.
Right. All right, let's do this. Hi, everyone. So today, I saw this question in the chat. Timebender360, is RC2 of .NET 8 coming out today? And the answer is yes. .NET 8 RC2 is dropping. It should be any minute now. It was supposed to have gone live already. I think they had a small issue with the deployment to the .NET website that they're working through. But hopefully, fingers crossed, within the next 10 minutes or so, you should see the bits go live. You can download them, you can install them, and start using them with also the latest Visual Studio preview updates as well. So what we plan to do today is we're going to show you the RC2 bits. We're going to walk through the updates that we've made to Blazor in .NET 8 RC2 so that you're already familiar with them. We are almost done with .NET 8. We've got a few more things that we're tweaking even in the final release for .NET 8 that's going to be coming out in November. And we'll try to highlight those things that are going to be slightly adjusted from RC2 to GA. I'm just trying to get everything polished up and done for that final release and the upcoming .NET Conf conference coming up in November. If you haven't already registered for .NET Conf, you should mark it on your calendar and get ready. It's going to be quite the event. Okay, let's go ahead and look at some .NET 8 RC2 features for Blazor. The first thing we're going to look at is global interactivity. We've added some new options to the Blazor web app template. That's the template I'm using here, right? So we're gonna create the new Blazor web app template. This is the new template in .NET 8 that can do all the render modes, static server rendering, interactive server rendering, client-side rendering. We'll select that. And Blazor App 1 sounds awesome. And here are all the new options. Now, I'm going to first start to focus on these ones, the interactivity type and the interactivity location. What are these things? Well, interactivity type, that's how you specify which interactivity modes do you want to use in your app. Do you want to use server, like interactive server rendering? That's kind of the Blazor server style, where you have a circuit and a real-time connection with the browser. Do you want to use WebAssembly? That's more Blazor WebAssembly style, where you're going to run things from the client, or both. Like give me it all. This is when you can actually do the auto render mode, where you switch from server to WebAssembly at runtime. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. We're going to stick with server for right now. But then there's also this interactivity location. What's that? This allows you to specify, well, where do you want that interactivity enabled? Do you want to be able to just do it on a per component or per page level, where you kind of have an island of interactivity in what is otherwise still just doing an app that's still doing static server rendering? Or do you want just the whole app to be interactive? And that's the new global setting. So you can say, I would like the whole app to use the interactive server mode or the interactive WebAssembly mode or the new auto mode. With interactive server enabled globally, that's very analogous to like Blazor server today. If you create a Blazor server app, the whole app is interactive using the Blazor server model. If you do WebAssembly, then it's very much like an existing Blazor WebAssembly app. The whole app is interactive using the Blazor WebAssembly interactive rendering model. Okay, so these are, if you're familiar with the old templates and coming to the new one, the global setting really sets you up to be in a world that will feel very familiar. So I'm going to go ahead and create a interactive server Blazor web app that's set up globally. And if we look at, let me make this full screen. Let's look at the app.razor file. This is the root component for the app. And you can see that it looks nice and clean. And we've got these two render mode attributes that are being applied to both our head outlet and also to the router. So everything, all the components in the app.razor file are set up to be interactive using the interactive server rendering mode. This will then propagate to all your other components. All your pages that are then routed to by the router will then also be interactive. Notice the new name. We did change the render mode name from just server to interactive server. Why did we do that? Well, we have actually two server side rendering modes in Blazor. We have static server rendering and interactive server rendering, which is the one that's based off of a Blazor server circuit. And we wanted to make it clear which one you're really using. So we decided to add the prefix to the different render modes to clarify that they are interactive render modes. Now, one of the changes we're still planning to do for .NET 8 is we can actually clean up the syntax a little bit. This render mode type, if we go to its definition, this is just a static class with some convenient properties on it for the different interactive render modes that we support: server, WebAssembly, and auto. So we can use C#. C#'s our friend. Let's go into imports.razor and let's add a using static right here. And we got to type out the whole namespace. Components web render mode. I'm just going to add a using static for my for that render mode type. And now we can actually simplify this a little bit. Instead of render mode dot, we can just say interactive server, or we can say just interactive server there. So that will just work. We'll be making that change in the templates for .NET 8 GA. You can start doing it yourself today. All right, so let's go ahead and run this and see what the app looks like. And this is probably going to pop up over here on my other screen. There it goes. Okay, so let's pull up this app and let's make sure that it's working as we expect. So if we go to the counter page, the counter is interactive. As I'm navigating around, this is, remember the router is set up to be interactive. So this is using interactive routing, like the router is actually handling the page navigations and then dispatching them to the corresponding component. Every page in this app is interactive. So if I go to the home page and let's add another counter right here, save that, let that hot reload, and now we've got a counter on the home page. It's interactive. The whole application is interactive. That's global interactivity. Now this is with Blazor, the server model. Let's use WebAssembly next. So I'm going to create another project. Let's do Blazor web app. And Blazor app 2 sounds great. And now instead of server, I'm going to do WebAssembly. So this will be analogous to a Blazor WebAssembly application, specifically the one that's ASP.NET Core hosted, right? Like where I have a server project. You can see here we've got two projects. This is my server. And then we also have the client project, which has the stuff that's going to be built for WebAssembly and shipped down to the browser. So if we look at our app.razor file, here you can see that instead of interactive server, we're using interactive WebAssembly. So this whole app is set to run on WebAssembly. And let's go ahead and run that and see what that looks like. It's not, oh, okay, this is good. I actually did this on purpose. There is a little bug in RC2 you should be aware of where we added a new error page to our Blazor web app template. And unfortunately for the WebAssembly rendering, we kind of messed up where it goes. It's meant to be rendered from the server, but we accidentally stuck it down here in the client. So if you hit that error where like, hey, why is this error page not compiling? That's our fault. It's not yours. Go ahead and just move it up into the server project in the components folder is just fine. Okay. Sorry about that. It's getting fixed for .NET 8 GA, but it's pretty easy to work around. Okay. Let's go ahead and get this app running. Now, the one thing that is different in this Blazor web app that's using interactive WebAssembly rendering globally is that it also has pre-rendering enabled by default. We didn't used to do that in the Blazor WebAssembly templates. We do that in the Blazor web app template. So if I go to the weather page and let's look at its source, you can see that all the weather data has actually been rendered from the server first into the HTML response, and then it gets wired up for interactivity client side with the Blazor WebAssembly runtime. Now, if you're used to Blazor WebAssembly, that might catch you by surprise in some situations, because now your components, they will first run on the server to do the first pre-rendering, and then they will run from the client. If you've written your components so that they are not set up to run on either the server or the client, you might run into some problems, but it's actually pretty easy to disable. Like if you don't want pre-rendering in your Blazor web app that's using the interactive WebAssembly render mode, it's pretty easy to change. Like we can go into our app.razor file. Let's make this full screen. And these render mode instances, you can just create them yourself. So I'm going to add a code block down here below, and I'm going to create a component render mode instance. And let's just call it render mode. And I'm going to create a new interactive WebAssembly render mode instance. And it takes a little parameter in its constructor where you can just say, you know what? Turn off re-rendering for me. I don't want it. And then now for our render modes on our components, we can just use that render mode instead. And this will.
I'm confused there. You said turn off pre-rendering, but it says pre-render true.
I just noticed that.
Okay. I was paying attention. See?
Yeah, good. Extreme programming helped me not write bugs. Okay, so this should be false. That will turn off pre-rendering. Okay, so now if we rerun this application and get the browser back up. Oh, is it? Okay, yeah, over here. I think this is the new app. Okay, so now if I look at the source for the weather page, you can see that weather data is no longer there. We're basically just getting the app.razor content, and then the weather data is being added purely client side, which is how an existing Blazor WebAssembly app today works, unless you've manually gone in and enabled pre-rendering. So now this app is directly analogous to a Blazor, an ASP.NET Core hosted Blazor WebAssembly app with pre-rendering not set up. So that's a convenient way if you're trying to upgrade a Blazor WebAssembly app to .NET 8. This is probably where you want to go. You can, of course, just update to .NET 8 and your existing app will run and function as is. But if you want to move to the Blazor web app model, this is how you're probably going to want to set it up, at least initially, until you're ready to get pre-rendering enabled with your components. All right. Okay. This at render mode directive, we've also made an improvement. Let me create a new app here. I'm actually going to create a Blazor web app that's not set up with interactivity globally. Let's do it per page. And let's just do server. Okay, this is the default when you create a Blazor web app. Just do server and do it per page. Now, in the only page in this app that is set up to be interactive is the counter component. And this is the syntax that we've had so far in .NET 8, where you apply this attribute, and that tells Blazor, hey, this is a component that would like to be interactive. In .NET 8 RC2, there's a better syntax that you can now start using, which is you just take that render mode Razor directive and you can apply it right here on your component. So then we can specify the render mode that we want. And I want, in this case, interactive server. And that should be exactly the same semantically as applying the attribute. And of course, we can do that same trick that we had before to simplify this. Like if we go into our imports.razor and let's add a using static Microsoft ASP.NET Core components.web.render mode, then we can even simplify that further. And instead of having this render mode in the front, we can just refer to the property name. So this is the syntax that we'll be shipping with when .NET 8 actually goes GA. You can use it today with RC2. It's not done in the templates for you, but you can update. And in fact, you should use the new syntax. The plan for .NET 8 GA is actually we're going to remove these attributes because they're no longer needed and we don't want to ship unnecessary API. So these attributes are going to go away, the three of them. And instead, this is the preferred syntax. Okay, so move to the new render mode Razor directive. If we run this application, it should run exactly as it did before. So now if we go to the counter, it should be interactive, and it is. Okay, so that's the new render mode Razor directive at the file scope, at the file level. All right, let's look at what's happening on the wire now in this application. So we've only enabled interactivity on this one page. So now if we go and look at the network tab, okay, and if I browse to the home page, and then I'm going to go to the counter page, Now watch the counter. Okay, now you see, let me make this a little bigger. Make it a little bigger. Okay, so you see down here, right here, this is our Blazor server WebSocket connection that's being set up. And if we look, we can see that the WebSocket is active. So the request hasn't finished yet, and the dev tools show that as pending. Like the connection is still active and running. So I can use the interactivity features. Everything's good. Now, if I browse away, let's say go to the home tab. Now watch the pending. Oh, did you see it? So now instead of pending, the connection was ended. We see the full time that the connection was live. That circuit has been freed up and cleaned up, and you've now saved on using server resources that you're not currently don't actually need to use. So this is cleaning up Blazor server circuits when when all of the interactive server components have been removed from the page. That is now working fully in .NET 8 RC2, so you get much better scale characteristics for your application. So that's kind of cool. Also, actually, let me bring up the DevTools again. If we browse around, now let me just refresh the homepage. So I'm gonna refresh the homepage, and we see all the content comes down. Like we get the root HTML and all the style sheets, and we see Blazor Web.js being loaded here. Now watch as I navigate. Like if I navigate to the weather page, notice that there's no, in fact, let me preserve log. It'll show it a little better. Notice that I'm not re-downloading everything. I'm just downloading like the HTML for that one page. This is enhanced navigation. This is the form of navigation that Blazor supports, where you can see that instead of doing a full document fetch, it's doing a JavaScript-based fetch under the covers. It's hitting the server. The server is doing still static server rendering, but then Blazor's taking care of patching the new content into the DOM without having to like reset all of the DOM's state. Now in RC2, we've made a bunch of improvements to how enhanced navigation works that I want to go through with you. One of the things about enhanced navigation is it's Blazor specific. Like the endpoints that you're navigating between, to get an enhanced navigation, they need to be a Blazor page, a Blazor endpoint. But what happens if you have other non-Blazor stuff in your web app? Like maybe you have an existing MVC or Razor Pages app, and you want to start using Blazor, so you add the support for Blazor components to that application, and then you have to be able to navigate between the previous pages and the new Blazor pages. Well, how does that work with enhanced navigation? Well, if you try to do an enhanced navigation to those non-Blazor pages, it will fail. In RC2, we've done some things to make that a little bit more robust. Let me show you. So I'm going to go into the app, and I'm going to actually turn on Razor Pages. So let's do Builder Services, and we'll add the Razor Pages services. And then I'm also going to set up the endpoints for map Razor Pages down here. And then let's add a Razor page. Doesn't really matter where. We do need to put it in the Pages folder. So I'm going to add a Pages folder, and let's add a new page. Let's call this one Razor Page. .cshtml, aptly named Razor Page, and we'll put a little heading in here. Reload telling me that just did a change that it can't hot reload. Let's put a heading in here to say that this is a Razor Page. Okay, and now I'm going to restart the app. Oh, I meant to also in my home page. Let's add a link. We'll add a link to Razor Page. The app popped up over here. Let's go in side by side. Okay, we'll save that, and we should now get a link on our page. We do. Okay, so if I bring up the browser DevTools and look at the network, and let's say we click on this link. I'm in a Blazor page right now, got enhanced navigation enabled. If I click on this link, you'll see that there's actually two requests that happen there. Do you see that? So the first one is the enhanced navigation attempt, where it tries to do a fetch request. You see this right here. Tries to do a fetch request, and then figures out, wait a minute, this is not a Blazor page. It's not going to work. And then we will retry that request and just do a normal document load in order to get to that page. So it will function. And this is nice. This means that you can use enhanced navigation and feel comfortable that you're not going to get random runtime failures for pages that for links to pages that you didn't realize, oh, wait, that's not a Blazor page. That might fail. We will just retry things for you so they will function. Now, having duplicate requests, that's not great. Like you don't want to send extra requests if you can avoid it. And so we've added some features where you can control where enhanced navigation happens in your app. And the way you can do that is on this tag, I can just add an attribute. And it's a data attribute. So data-enhance nav. And you can disable enhanced navigation for this link. Okay. So now if I go ahead and hot reload that into the application, and then let's go ahead and clear out the network so we get something a little clearer. Now, if I click on the Razor Pages link, you can see that I only get that one request. I don't have the duplicate requests anymore. We've already told Blazor, hey, this is going to go to a non-Blazor page. Don't bother with an enhanced navigation. It's not gonna work. And this also works in a hierarchical fashion. Like if you take this attribute, let's say we had like a div up here up top that's wrapping our link. And then I put this enhanced nav false up on the div and save that. That should hot reload in. Okay, now if I click on, well, actually, let's do true just to see that it's actually did something. We can see the divs applied because it's now on a new line. So now we see the duplicate requests, right? Because we enabled enhanced navigation for a page that doesn't support it. And then if I turn it off and hot reload that, back, and let's clear this and click again, we can see now we've got a normal page load. Okay, so that's how you can control enhanced navigation in your app using this new data enhanced nav attribute. And it works in a hierarchical fashion. It'll apply to all of the child elements on the page. What about forms? So we've also made some changes and improvements to how enhanced form handling works. So let's go back to the home page and we can close this. For forms, we've actually decided in RC2 that enhanced handling of form posts really should be something that you opt. Oh, I guess I put that should be. There we go. Anyway, for form handling, it really should be something that you opt into. And why is that? Well, if you set up a form that posts to a non-Blazor endpoint and you have enhanced form handling enabled, again, that will fail, but we can't just retry that for you because a post request has side effects. And so we don't know if reposting the thing is going to cause you to buy something twice or whatever. So because of that potential issue, we've decided that you really need to signal that you make it an opt-in gesture, that if you want your forms to actually support enhanced navigation. And it's easy to do. If you want a form to support enhanced nav, enhanced handling, you just add the data-enhance attribute on the form. This is for like a vanilla form. So that will work. And we can run this and see that we should get enhanced form handling for this form. And I think it's actually open and just hidden. There it is. Okay, so here's a little form that I can, let's bring up the browser dev tool so we can see this. If I post, you can see that I'm not re-downloading all the style sheets and stuff. I'm getting an enhanced navigation for that little form post. Then the way you do that is with this data-attribute. If you have edit form-based forms, and that would look something like this. Paste in a new form. And this is an edit form, so it's got a model and it's doing data annotation based validation. It's got all these bells and whistles going. If you're doing a static server rendered edit form, then the way you enable enhanced form handling is with the enhance component parameter on the edit form component. Okay, and that will do the same thing. I think I gotta rerun this. I'll refresh this. And let's go ahead and clear out that. And so now if I say Bob, with that, again, we're seeing an enhanced navigation. You see the fetch request is happening instead of a full page navigation. And this should support client form validation as well. Like if I submit a name that has more than 3 characters in it, then that fails. So that's also working too. Okay, so that's enhanced form handling. Just it's opt-in now. Use the new data-enhance or the enhance component parameter on edit form to get that going. 2 other things with enhanced navigation. We've received some feedback that sometimes with enhanced navigation, it becomes problematic if you're doing other things in JavaScript. Like, for example, maybe you have some JavaScript where you set up some state on the page, like you have a div or some content that you add using some JavaScript code. And then you do an enhanced navigation, it renders on the server, that content comes back, and then the Blazor diffing algorithm says, well, there's that content you just added in JavaScript, that's not in the new server rendered page, so I'm going to get rid of it, and it just blows it away. And if you have that content being set up on page load, then there's no real opportunity to reset it up again because it was enhanced navigation, so the scripts don't run again. So how can you deal with that problem? Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to go into the layout, and I'm going to add a div to the top row. I'm just going to copy this div in. So let's add a div right here in the top row of the layout. And then I'm going to add a little bit of script that's just going to populate that div with some content. Okay, so this should get that div by ID, and then it's just going to put a little bit of content in there that says hello from JavaScript. Okay, now if I run this, okay, so now the page is loaded. You can see that my JavaScript ran and it populated that div, so that's working fine. But if I browse to another page, oh, it just disappeared. And if I browse back to home, it doesn't come back. That's because enhanced navigation is cleaning up the DOM to match whatever it got from the server. How can I preserve that content that I actually want to still stick around? Well, there's an attribute that we've added for that, and that's the data permanent attribute. And this is a way that you can attribute some content and say, you know what, enhanced navigation, please don't touch this. Like, this should stay. This needs to stick around, okay? So if we refresh the page. Okay, so now I see my hello from JavaScript. If I start to browse, it's still there. If I go back, it stays around. Data permanent is a way that you can tell enhanced navigation that there's content on the page that you don't want it to remove. And the last trick that you can do is if you need to run some code to actually reestablish some JavaScript state that you're setting up on the initial page load, we've also added an event that you can hook to run some additional logic. So let me go to the home page here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a script tag, not the home page, the app.razor component. And after the Blazor script loads, I'm going to run this script, which hooks this event, which is this new enhanced load event, which will tell you, it will fire every time an enhanced navigation happens. It'll also fire for streaming updates as well. And here I'm just going to log something to the console to show that that's working. Okay, so if we rerun this, and let's bring up the browser dev tools, and then let's refresh the page just to make sure we got the new stuff. Okay, so if we look in the browser dev console, and as I navigate around, you can see I'm getting my console text being written to the dev console that enhanced update has occurred. Notice that when I browse to the weather page, that we see the enhanced update occurred event fired, and then we actually get two more. Why is that? Well, that's because the weather page is set up to use streaming rendering. So it will receive a couple of additional enhanced updates to the page that are being streamed from the server. So we're getting updates for those too. So this is an event that you can hook if you need to write some additional JavaScript logic that you want to run whenever you navigate to a page, stuff that you might today handle by putting that logic in like on-page load. This is a way that you can still have that logic run whenever someone navigates to a page, even if it's an enhanced navigation. All right. Last thing I wanted to show was also that there's been a little bit of change to the Blazor WebAssembly template. So if I go File, New Project, and if we look at this one right here. So the Blazor WebAssembly template still exists and still there. In .NET 8, we're shipping two Blazor templates, really. Blazor Web, the Blazor Web App template, and Blazor WebAssembly. There's also Blazor Hybrid, which ships with Maui. The Blazor WebAssembly template is, you might ask, why we still have it. Well, the Blazor Web App template is really very server-centric. Like it's based on taking advantage of server capabilities to make your Blazor Web App great. But there are still scenarios where you might want to have a serverless Blazor application. Like you want to publish your application to a static site hosting solution that doesn't let you run an ASP.NET Core process on the server. So that's what the Blazor WebAssembly template is still for. We have removed, let me go ahead and start creating one so you can see this. In the options, you'll notice that we have removed the ASP.NET Core hosted option from this template. That's because that scenario is really handled now by the Blazor Web App template. just do global interactivity with WebAssembly, or even using the new auto render mode. And that's really the new ASP.NET Core hosted Blazor WebAssembly experience. But we have also added an option to the Blazor web app template, which is the include sample pages option. So instead of having a separate empty template, we're now just including this option so that you can say, you know what, I don't need a counter, I don't need a weather page. Just give me a nice blank canvas to start with. Okay, so this a couple updates to Blazor WebAssembly, new template name to really let everyone know that this is just for the serverless cases, static site cases. For server-based cases, you should use the Blazor web app template. There's a new option for empty, and we've removed the ASP.NET Core hosted option. All right, and lastly, I think we wanted to show the identity changes as well, the auth support. Jeremy, do you want to show that?
I do want to show that. Let me get my screen pulled up here and shared to everyone. And should be good. Okay. So in this release, we have the easy button for auth, which I hope it ends up being shipped. I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project that is a Blazor web app, just like you've seen. We're going to go into this and keep those defaults. And then here we've got our authentication type. Let me see if there we go. Authentication type, we're going to change that to individual accounts. So this is for standalone, what we call self-host authentication, where ASP.NET Identity is going to host the database and all of the information you need for this. We're going to keep it server. I think per page per component's fine for this. Let's start with the server version and do create. But what we've done, a big request for us is that in the existing identity model, which can be used with Blazor, when you scaffold the identity UI, so that's the UI that does logins and registration and everything else, it was scaffolded as a HTML rendered server-side app. It was basically back in the MVC days. So what we've done is we've actually created a full template that includes all of your identity UI as Blazor components. And I'm going to run this to show you these, and then we'll look at some code really quickly. And I also want to show you that the team that's been working on this didn't just add the capability for server as well. So we're going to look at when you use the WebAssembly feature and the WebAssembly rendering, there's some caveats there as well. So let's do this. I'm going to just go ahead and spin my mouse clockwise here to speed up the build. Let's get that going. Seems to work most of the time. And it even said it skipped the analyzers to speed up the build for me. So we should be rocking and rolling here. Dun, dun, dun. Snap my fingers a couple times. So this is the other feature that we added, is that the build is now very thorough. So it's checking and double checking and making sure everything looks right. So we're going to have a perfect execution when these pages eventually pop up. All right, this is getting to be officially fun. Come on, you can do it. Let me just make sure it's not like opening hidden pages in the background. Dun, dun, dun.
While you're doing that, I saw recently there's a preview feature you can enable in Visual Studio where it like disables, or it's more optimistic in its checks for builds. I don't think that would help this because this is file new project, but like in rebuilds.
No, I think this is something else going on that I'll have to troubleshoot, but it hasn't crashed yet. That's good. Someone's begging for the blue screen. Why would you wish that on anyone? Uh-oh, looks like we've got... Dun, dun, dun. This is okay, though, because I do have one that I tested earlier that was... What are these build errors? Dun, dun, dun.
Jeremy, if you need me to do it, I can also show the identity UI. I've got that on my page.
Let me make sure I'm in the right.
Yeah, people are guessing dependencies aren't installed.
Wait, where's my?
I think I remember having this exact issue with the internal preview version of VS, so maybe that could be it.
Yeah, I think I opened the wrong preview. Let me try my other preview here. Let's try.
This is part of the fun we deal with internally at Microsoft, right? Because we're juggling the internal builds before it goes live. And then hopefully when we release it, the day it goes out, everything just works for you.
While he's doing this,
yeah, I was on the internal preview, not the regular preview. But if this doesn't pull up in like 2 seconds, then I might have you pull something up, Dan. But
yeah, no problem. I've got it up. I believe the RC2 posts are now live. Is that right, John? Like I think I see them on the blog. So everything's up. If you want to try out RC2, you can start your downloads, rev your CPU cooling fans, and get going with the bits.
Well, yeah, we could run from the .NET CLI if we had to as well, probably.
Mm-hmm.
We're opening the new preview now, but it is going slow. So someone show.
So we're getting lots of questions coming in, but we're also short on time this week. So we may have to do a Q&A in the following week or something. Should we play the Mission Impossible?
Here's the other create. And if we want to answer some questions while this is spinning up, if the last performance, I'm hoping with the right preview up that we'll get a little bit better performance here. But can we still use Duende, BFF auth, and Blazor 8 with WASM as it needs the back end? So you should still be able to use Duende. We've actually worked with that team.
Is John's audio?
And
yeah, I'm getting that too.
Yeah, I think Jeremy's machine is busy.
Are making sure that I
think we might have lost him.
Keep spinning our wheels. I think
yeah.
It's like the sloth scene from Zootopia where the
So there are some other questions. There was one Marcus patiently asked at the very beginning about built-in support for shortcuts without JavaScript. And I think he was, bringing up especially like accessibility.
Interesting. I mean, I don't think we have anything currently on the plans for having like a built-in feature there. But we'd be open to entertaining it. If you want to open a GitHub issue on the repo and describe a little bit about what you'd like what you'd like us to see us add, so we can discuss it with the community, that would be great. But not currently. Like we don't have any like immediate plans for shortcuts.
Let me see. I'm not sure if any. This was interesting to me.
The bad news is I'm still building. The good news is. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We're taking some questions while you're doing that. All right, go ahead. You're still building. So that's good.
I've got it up and running. Should we go ahead and flip? Like that I can
I'll flip over to Dan's real quick.
Cool? And Jeremy, you can direct my hands. Okay, so I did the same thing Jeremy did. I did with the RC2 bits. So this is what the app looks like. And so you can go ahead and register new users. Like I'll set up a user here. Here's the password. And I think this should bump me over to the database exception page. Now, if you try to do this with the template, there is a little issue with the template. It's kind of similar to the issue that I showed, where the migration page is missing the endpoints. So you'll need to add this little three or four lines of code to your project to get that migration web page to actually work. So if you get an error from that migration page, that's why. Just add the use migration endpoints. Or if you run migrations for EF Core from the command line, that will also work. But I already made that little tweak, so it's up and running. And we'll go ahead and confirm my email account. So that looks good. And now I should be able to log in. And let's do that with my previously careful selected password. And there we go. Okay. And so then we have this auth required page, which will pick up the user identity. So all the authentication code is sitting in the identity subfolder. In the pages accounts. This is where most of the identity code lives. So you can update it, remove pages that you don't need, tweak things to your heart's content in order to get the built-in identity experience that you want. These pages are all built to run from the server. They are using the ASP.NET Core Identity API, so they do need to run from the server. The templates won't currently push them all the way to the client, but you can have like a mix, like where you have most of your app running from WebAssembly, and then the identity stuff runs server side, but still implemented with Blazor components. Now, one cool thing I wanted to show is that when you do the identity stuff and you do set up WebAssembly, so let's do another Blazor web app. I did server just like Jeremy showed before, but if I switch it to, let's do individual user accounts, and I'm going to switch to like auto, and yeah, that'll be fine. I'll go ahead and create that. There's a cool trick that we're doing to get the identity to go to the client. Because with ASP.NET Core Identity, the identity is really being established on the server. Like that's where the database is. That's where we issue like a cookie so that we know when you send us a request who the user is authenticated as. But what if you need code running on WebAssembly that understands who the user is? How do you flow the identity to the user? In the past, we used identity server and an OIDC flow and acquiring an ID token from the client to handle that. In .NET 8 RC2, we're actually taking advantage of another new feature that's now working with Blazor Web Apps. It's an old feature, but it's working now with Blazor Web Apps, which is the ability to persist component state into the page. So if we go looking in here, there is this persisting revalidating authentication state provider. If you're familiar with Blazor, the authentication state provider is the thing that handles establishing who the user is and making that available to all the components. And this one is using the persistent component state service, which is a service that we've had for a while. But this service will allow you to register an event to say, hey, I'm about to persist some state onto the page. Do you want to add anything? And then components can register that event and add additional state to the page so that they can read it later, like if you want to read it from the client. And so you'll see down in the client project, there's another persistent authentication state provider, which is set up for the client part of the application that knows how to then read the persisted state and establish the claims principle for that user. So persisting component state is also now working in .NET 8 RC2. You can use it in your apps. In .NET 7, you used to have to use a tag helper, like the persistent component state tag helper, to actually do the writing of the state into the page. With a Blazor web app, you don't need that tag helper. A Blazor web app will just handle that for you. You can just use the persistent component state service from your components, and it should just work. So that's your Jeremy, anything else you want me to?
Yeah, the only thing else I wanted to add as my computer goes up in flames is we have a sample we're working on for the standalone Blazor WebAssembly template as well. So that one will use the endpoint APIs to establish identity, but it will also reuse this authentication state provider. That's what's great about this model, is there's a standard way to sort of transmit the changes and updates to the state of authentication throughout the application. So the only difference will be, instead of using the persisted state, it'll call out to the APIs and use that. But look for that sample to come out as well, so that all of your possible Blazor configurations are completely covered for this.
Nice. Yeah, the new identity endpoints are going to open up a whole bunch of interesting scenarios. So like static Blazor WebAssembly standalone apps, and also like native client mobile applications. they can leverage that those endpoints to also handle authentication.
Yes.
Cool. All right, that's what we had to show. That's what's new in RC2. And I know we went fast. I saw the comment go by saying, "Wow, that was really fast." Yeah, we wanted to try and squeeze it all in. You can rewatch it at half speed, and
There you go.
to figure out what we said.
You can see Jeremy's computer crash in even slower motion.
That's
Do we have any other questions, John? What else have we got?
We do have some good questions. So Mackinnon, I don't know if you want to jump in with any too.
Yeah, sure. I can take a look.
I'll grab one just that jumped out to me. So we've got some custom data attributes. Is there a way to namespace them or something if you've got other libraries that collide with those?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I've had that. I'm wondering if we needed to do that as well. Yeah, I don't know. Is that the convention with data dash attributes? Is that they should have like data dash and then some namespace prefix? I don't know.
I've seen all kinds of things. Yeah.
I mean, it would only really matter, I think, if you had two frameworks that were using the same attribute in like conflicting ways.
Like data dash enhance. Yeah, it's true. Like they shouldn't conflict, right? They both kind of, but let's say the way they would conflict is if I need to use it for another, say, JavaScript library, I want to turn on data dash enhance for their component, but I don't want it to enable enhanced navigation for Blazor.
That'd be a bit like enhanced navigation would be the data dash enhance dash nav. So I guess if a JavaScript library had that, then you would be
that's already pretty
having
specific.
some conflicting behavior there. Yeah, well, I've had this same thought, and we can discuss it some more and see if we think there's a concern about collisions there.
Maybe it could be like data dash BL dash something, so you don't have to type out like the full word Blazor or something.
Blazor, it's a lot of characters.
Yeah.
If we just put the B, we could save on the dash too, just BL and then the word, like
just a fire emoji.
Enhance.
Let me see. There's one about analyzers. So like if you're using a server attribute on a WebAssembly app or something like that.
Analyzers are interesting. I believe we do provide errors if you try to swap from, like if you start out with one interactive rendering mode and you try to change to another. Mackinnon, that's a runtime error? Is that right?
It is, yeah. It's sometimes kind of hard to tell how a component will be rendered at compile time. So we don't currently have analyzers that detect that kind of thing. Like for example, you could have a component with like a render mode server attribute that, and then you override it like with render mode WebAssembly at runtime. I think that would work, for example, or like you don't know if, for example, you switch from like SSR to WebAssembly, then back to server, depending on like what component hierarchy you're rendering. There's just like a lot to think about or a lot to determine at compile time, and I don't think that's something that we plan to do in the near term, at least.
Like those render modes can be specified on component instances, so we'd have to have something that can like traverse down the component hierarchy, the graph, and figure out like what components are here. And technically, there can be code, right, that's run to like you can have like if conditions that change the render mode at runtime by just switching which instance you pass to a component's render mode directive. So it's tricky. We do get the concern. Maybe.
Yeah, we'll think about it.
Let me see.
I think I saw a question earlier about, so you know how we're getting rid of those temporary attributes for specifying a render mode directly on the component. I think someone was asking, how do you do that if you're not using Razor, if you're using code behind? Yeah. And I believe what we can do is there is still a component called an attribute called the render mode attribute, and you can still apply that to your code behind definition of the class and just specify which render mode it should use. I believe that's what the Razor compiler actually compiles that render mode directive down to. I think
so. I talked to Steve about this because I had this same question. I believe the way the compiler actually deals with the render mode directive is it's calling APIs and slotting in the render mode at the appropriate spot in the render tree builder logic in the component. So you can write the same code that the compiler generates, but I don't think it's going to be attribute based in for .NET 8 GA. It'll be a more imperative style where you say like, hey, when I'm creating this component instance, I want it to be, this component should be using this particular render mode. So that, yeah, there will be a way to do it, Alex. As with a lot of things with the pure C# version of building Blazor components, it might not be the easiest piece of code, but there will be a way to do it.
Maybe time for like one more question. We actually have like a hard stop right on the hour for some of us. So let me see. I don't know. Here's one that jumped to me. Considered supporting a deployment that allows draining circuits gracefully and connecting clients to a new circuit on a new deployed version. They use front door to do this now, but it's not perfect.
Okay. So I think this is really about like, hey, I'm using Blazor server, and the like state management and reconnection experience for Blazor server is got some tricky things to it. The experience can sometimes not be great. Like you deploy a new update to your Blazor server app, you lose the circuit state, your clients are now disconnected, and they have to basically refresh the browser. If there's a GitHub issue, we've been tracking this feature for a while called pause and resume for Blazor server, which is a bit of a loaded name, but that's the GitHub issue title, I believe, still. That Steve Sanderson has actually published a couple of experiments on there for improved reconnection logic, and also for techniques that you can use for doing state management. Then we encourage you to take a look at. We can grab, if someone can grab the issue link, we also share that. Those are some areas that we've been in, some ways that we've been investigating to handle this problem. But I do think this will be an area of investment for .NET 9. I mean, it's still early for .NET 9, but if I had to guess, this has been an area we've wanted to do for a while, which is improve the Blazor server deployment model and handling of circuits. So hopefully we'll do something in this space in the next year.
Cool. All right. I think we're at time. We covered a ton of stuff. We had talked about doing a Q&A this time to cover some unanswered. Maybe we should do that soon.
Yeah, I think we've accumulated a bit of a backlog, but maybe next stand up.
There's just too much new stuff in the release to talk about.
The good news is we actually do have a thing set up to archive all the live chat, and they go into a thing, and we can spreadsheetize them and maybe get AI to answer them for us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, congrats to the team for the release. This is exciting.
Thank you. And if you have questions that we didn't get to here, of course, you can reach out to us on X. Is what I get, whatever, or Mastodon, or of course GitHub. You can just post questions in the GitHub repo. There's lots of ways that you can reach us if we don't happen to get you a response in these live streams.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's wrap there. Thanks, everybody. Yeah. Okay. Bye.